And good afternoon and welcome into the Senate Committee on Government Operations Committee meeting of Thursday, March 27th. March is quickly getting to be in the rear view mirror. Our first item today is S84, which is our version of the state contracting standards for advertising. The other body has, I believe, third reading was today on, I don't remember their number, but mirrored our bill with some differences. But today we're going to hear from Wendy Knight, Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery, and also Emily Kosicki, who is the Deputy Commissioner with BGS. And Wendy's going to go first. So again, very quickly, if we could go around and introduce ourselves.
Senator Hart from Orange County.
Allison Clarkson from Windsor County. I'm Brian Collmore, the committee chair from Rutland County.
Jillian, committee assistant.
Nice to meet you.
Tanya Bihovsky is elsewhere in the world.
But doing well. And I'm Senator Becca White from Windsor County. Nice to see you. And I left my iPad in my other committee, which I have the bill on. So
Okay. If you are fleet of feet, we can still.
I'm just gonna grab it so I don't.
Testimony and.
Okay.
Hold it. Feet and feet.
Wendy, welcome. It's great to
Thank
see you
you.
as always.
Thanks for having me in. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my perspective and experience on the bill.
Okay.
So,
I know one of the things we want to address is where the funding is for
right.
the advertising that's being done. So I learned something this morning that I wasn't aware of when we talked.
Right. The Department of Liquor and Lottery is an enterprise fund, two enterprise funds. So I want to chat about that. And also, I don't know if you've had any marketing 101, so I might do a little
Okay.
that.
Sure.
That might help
Yep.
the committee understand a little bit about advertising and marketing.
Yeah. Please,
All right.
go on.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Well, for the record, Wendy Knight, Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. Appreciate you having me in here to chat. First of all, I completely appreciate and support the intent of trying to support local media. I am a 7-day super reader. I am a sustaining member of Vermont Public, and I subscribe to my local newspaper, the Addison Independent. So I'm also a former journalist. I subscribe also to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, I will say. So there's opportunities for local, right, and national. And then I have a marketing background. I'm a former ad agency executive and marketing executive. So some of what I'm going to talk about is informed by that. Now, I happen to be the appointing authority of a very unique department within state government, right? So the Department of Liquor and Lottery operates 2 enterprise funds. What that means is they're essentially businesses. The state gives the department the authority to operate businesses within the confines of state government. So that is what they are. They're businesses. So like a private sector business like Darn Tough or Vermont Glove. Allison, Senator Clarkson, I mean, nice to see you. The legislature has given us the authority to manage those businesses. So in terms of managing those businesses, we have to understand what is the product or service they're selling, who are our target audiences, and how do we best reach those target audiences. So the unique perspective of the enterprise fund is that unlike some of the other state agencies, our budget comes from the consumers. So we don't get an appropriation from the legislature to run our business. We get an appropriation from the legislature for a tiny piece of that budget, which is mostly the salaries. So much like Vermont Glove relies on its revenue from its consumers, our revenue comes from the consumers. They come from people that are buying 802 spirits. That includes Vermonters of drinking age that want to participate in that activity. It includes the visitors, and it includes all of the bars, restaurants, hotels, any of the on-premise licensees. As a control state, they must buy it from an 802 Spirits. So that's the revenue that we generate. There's also some violation fees, and then there's licensing fees. So when we have that revenue as operating a business, right, we say, here's the revenue, here are our operating expenses, and here's the profit. And then the net profit goes back to the state. So that's what we contribute to the state. So on the 802 Spirit side, the Division of Liquor Control, that money, and I mentioned last year, it's, $31 million. In addition, the state receives money through the alcohol component of rooms and meals tax, which is to say, the idea is that when we want to maximize the profits for the state. That's what you've entrusted the department to do. And so as the executive of that business, in a sense, right, appointing authority on the CEO of the Division of Liquor Control, then what I try to do is make sure that we're generating revenue, right? Make sure that sales are good and that we're collecting the products that we sell or they're in stores. I can't force people to consume. We don't promote consumption, right? All I can do is let people know where they are, how much it is, and that. So when I look at a declining revenue on the liquor side, that makes it ever more important that we are maximizing and making sure that the operating expenses, including the advertising and the marketing, be cost effective, right? It has to be, again, a little bit of marketing 101, right? You have a product or a service and you want to reach those consumers. And so there's various consumers. So on the Vermont lottery side, it might be the players that are playing the lottery right now. It might be consumers we don't know that are playing the Vermont lottery. And so right now, if we're looking at existing lottery players, we might be advertising in a local TV because some of the older people tend to watch TV, as opposed to a responsible gaming campaign or campaign we did on Just Ask for ID, where we're actually trying to reach the teenagers to convey a message about not consuming alcohol. We do that through Facebook, right? So therein lies the rub, is that when you're doing digital media, there's not a local equivalent to do that kind of digital media. So I guess my first point is, as an enterprise fund, I would ask for, just like or the House, sorry, I don't know where quite this is, but the House carved out tourism and I think workforce is part of that, because obviously we recruit out of state. So as an enterprise fund, I would request that the Department of Liquor and Lottery be excluded from this, because we are not a traditional agency that's funded by the state. Beyond that, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the problems as a marketer, right? As someone who is a journalist, I have local media, but also a marketer, I can talk a little bit about how I see this as being unnecessarily bureaucratic and cumbersome. Again, totally appreciate, we want to support local media. I would say that we want to support our local general stores too. We're proponents of supporting local, but we're not forcing Vermonters to spend 80% of their dollars at a general store versus Amazon. So this feels like that. It feels like, so why is this just about local media? Like, if you want everyone to buy local, how are you sparsing that? And the way I see it is, it feels like you're directing state dollars, right? Government operations. And so that's where I would exclude the department, because our state dollars aren't coming. But beyond that, I think my colleagues from BGS can talk about the contracting process, but just as a marketer, the decisions that a marketer makes, the decisions that an agency that's doing a marketing campaign makes, it's very specific to the campaign, right? And it changes based on the metrics that you see, right? So sometimes these are multi-faceted campaigns. You're using what's called your owned media. So those are your websites and your social media and your newsletters. And then you're using paid media, where you're paying a news organization to run an ad. And more, it's moving away from some of the TV ads, because people aren't consuming their media from TV. They're consuming their media through social media. Now, I'm not talking about whether that's good or bad. I'm just talking about practically what's happening. And then you have streaming TV, right? And so as someone that's putting together an advertising campaign, it's going to run the gamut. Sometimes we're going to take out an ad on WCAX because we want to reach a certain population with a certain message. Sometimes it's going to be streaming radio. So it's going to be Spotify because we're going to reach that message. Sometimes it's an advertising on Hulu. So it becomes very problematic when you are putting an arbitrary, to me, the percentage isn't arbitrary. And it's taking the decision away from the decision makers in the agencies that are the experts in communication and marketing.
And I can only speak for myself. I don't think when this bill was first introduced, it had any intention of being stamped and onto the floor with it now. It's a work in progress. The counterpart in the House has come up with 70% as their target. And they also, as we will in this one, should it remain, the way it is, have exemptions for tourism and also for job seeking. So for instance, Forest and Parks, if they need summer help, they're free to go out of state to find candidates to come in and work in the state parks. So those two exemptions will be built into the S bill if that's how we choose to proceed. And I think it is important to understand what Commissioner Knight is saying is there's not general fund dollars involved here. It's two enterprise funds, which have nothing to do with the general fund in terms of funding. So it is different.
I like the way you elevated Wendy. She just became General Knight.
Oh. Did I say general?
No relation. No, you said general.
I loved it. I loved
thought
that you
you
did that.
said-
I think
I think General Knight might have something.
Yeah, I'm
You
sure
might
you
feel
would.
differently about that.
Yes. Okay, Senator White.
Thank you, Chair Collmore. And thank you, Commissioner Knight. So I just want to start by saying I am supportive of an exemption for enterprise funds. I think that that's a reasonable suggestion based on the work that you do. But I wanted to ask a couple questions about that. And then I also just wanted to kind of pose a little bit of a question to you in your professional realm. So the first set of questions relates to the enterprise fund itself and how you market. I am concerned to learn that the state is marketing alcohol and gambling as a part of our budget. I was under the impression that you only market the programs basically to prevent the use of the products in essence, or to share information about a distributor sales point for like a bar or restaurant, like that kind of thing. So I guess if you could just alleviate my concerns.
Yes,
Are
I can.
we promoting alcohol sales on Facebook as a government?
So let me address that. So on the alcohol side, we're not promoting products. The suppliers promote the products. All we do is let people know, because we run a retail network. The only way you can buy alcohol in the state of Vermont is to go to an 802 Spirits store.
Yeah.
So we let people know where new products are, where the stores are, and how much it is. So we don't spend any money promoting alcohol, right? We are promoting the brand of an 802 Spirits store. So when you look at the liquor side, there is an 802 Spirits magazine that
Yeah, I've seen that.
people pick up
It's
and they
free.
can see, right, it's free to people, but it's not free. There's a cost
Oh,
for
yeah.
that, right?
Mhm.
And so the suppliers will put ads in it, and then there's information for the consumer on what's available, how much it is, where the stores are, and what products are new. So that's an example.
Okay, that's really helpful. So it's not that your department doesn't say, oh, okay, we got Lawson's Finest. We're gonna buy Facebook ads for people to go buy Lawson's Finest.
So let me clarify, the Department of Liquor and Lottery runs 802 Spirit stores. The only thing that's for sale that we have responsibility for are the spirits and the fortified wines, not beer, wine, cider, or
let me
low
think.
ABV.
I
So a different
apologize.
example,
Let me give an example.
Bar Hill, Caledonia Spirits.
I'm in AA and I'm sober, so I
Yeah,
don't know any of the
it's okay.
brands
It's okay.
anymore. Okay, so you got Bar Hill. You don't buy a Facebook ad for Bar Hill.
No, they buy their own.
But you say you could get Bar Hill at 802 Spirits in Montpelier.
Or you could get spirits at.
Right, so we promote the 802 Spirits.
Okay, so you
brand.
don't list any brands, so you're not saying, so wait, can you
Yeah, so
describe
we
an
are
ad?
not-
Like, I'm trying to parse it through because I don't
So-
like what you're
Okay,
describing, and I
so-
want to agree with you.
Yes, so we do not market alcohol. That's not
You
what.
market a
802
place to purchase alcohol.
Correct. So we tell people, here's the products we have, here's how much they cost because we're setting the price, and here are the stores where you can buy it at. That's what our liquor advertising is.
So do you buy Facebook ads that say you can buy Bar Hill at,
Not specifically.
you can
no.
buy gin for $18 or whatever at this location? Is that what,
So.
I'm trying to picture an ad, I guess.
So we would do, let me give you an example of a Facebook advertising or LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, Instagram.
Instagram, perfect, yeah.
So we would say, we have a cocktail rack program. That's an initiative we have where we're starting to, it's 3 years now. And so we have racks, literally cocktail racks. They go in a special place in an 802 Spirit store. They now go into 15 stores. And then the supplier, so we have, Mad River was one of the first.
Okay.
So they participate in the cocktail rack program, and part of participating in the rack program is they get a feature on the 802 Spirits magazine, and then their product is featured on a rack. And so we do social media. We say, hey, our cocktail rack program distiller is Mad River. Here's the recipes. Here's the stores they're in.
I guess that does feel like advertising alcohol by the government. I guess just like, I don't, I'm not trying to say that it's, I don't love that generally. So that's a whole different conversation.
Correct,
from
because
this.
if you don't love that, then you wouldn't be in favor of having the state control the alcohol distribution.
I would not be in favor of the state marketing.
So here's what I would say to that. You can't authorize, well,
You can.
no, here's what I'm saying. It would be silly for the state to authorize the department to run a business and then not to allow that business to market or advertise. Because when we're successful at advertising and marketing, what we can do is maximize the profits to the state. And so that's what we're the trade-off, right? You're asking us to run a business and then we're generating profits.
Yeah,
So-
no, I get
and on the,
that. I understand you're a different fund, and I guess I generally do. I don't super love it in general for anything that is so, I mean, if you read 7 Days, you're a super reader. We have a major drinking problem
Right.
in this state, and it is crippling our healthcare system in
Yeah.
many ways. So that's a separate thing, and that
yeah,
you
that's a
you
much
you have
bigger
a
issue.
bigger
And
question.
I'm
So
not
let
going
me
to speak to that.
let me get back to the main question that I'm trying to get at. So you run a business throughout this whole enterprise fund thing. So you want to be able to market however you want to market because you're trying to maximize revenue. Even if I disagree with that concept, like foundationally, I can understand that you're trying to do your work. So I want to understand more about where you're advertising, because the question I want to pose to you is, why should government information be kept in a place where you have to make an account like Facebook or Instagram and basically promoting that you have to go to this place to get that information? So if you understand what I'm saying, we're putting government information on a special place that is online, that you have to make an account, that you have to sign up for, that you are contractually agreeing with this mega corporation. I don't think we should be promoting government anything on those spaces because they're a separate platform. So could you describe to me why it sounds like the marketing is so good on these places that we have to use them, but why is it so good that we have to put Vermont consumers at risk by them having government information on these sites? Like, why do we use Facebook or Instagram when we know it's so bad?
So the reason why we market on Instagram and Facebook is because that's where the consumers are. So just generally speaking, right? You're trying to take your dollars and you're trying to maximize those dollars. So you're trying to reach your audience in the most cost-effective way. So for
So it's that
example,
cost effective.
so yes, for example, on the just
Just like dollars, again, it's a kind of catch-22.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get, it's
Because
that effective that we have to put,
But there's a whole range of marketing. Sometimes we're advertising on a TV spot at WCX, local TV.
and that would be a less.
Sometimes we're advertising on Vermont Public.
Also,
Sometimes we're advertising on, so what happened a couple of years ago is the streaming came into play, right? So now suddenly you have an option to advertise on the radio streaming. So you have Spotify and you have Pandora. So there's new channels that emerge, right? And so for us to reach I'll give you the example, the Just Ask for ID campaign, right? This is using, it's a messaging, right? So we don't need WCX to develop an ad for us. It's just a message. Here's our message and here's our graphic and here's the link to go to the survey and here's the link to go to the pledge. So we're trying to reach teenagers and people that are under 24. Well, where are they? They're not listening to Vermont Public. They're not watching TV. They are on social media. So that's why some of the campaign has to, so for me,
So what you're saying is this marketing space is so effective for you to get your message out.
for some of our message, sure. And some of the other agencies, some of their message, I mean, you think about the mental health department or the Department of Health, like every one of our agencies have messages they want to communicate to Vermonters.
Yeah.
Here's what I see. As the businesswoman, this is a business opportunity because to reach a local market, so the example is the responsible gaming. We wanted to do a responsible gaming initiative in the fall for responsible gaming month. So if I want to reach every Vermonters in all 14 counties and all corners, what's my option? My option is to find all those local independent news outlets, right? Which there are many, and sometimes they have our advertising programs available, sometimes they don't, sometimes they use third parties. So running down that rabbit hole to find all this information and then to make specific ads for all those, that is not a cost-effective use of time or money. So what's the alternative? Front porch forum. Great. Everyone is starting again. Media consumption changes. It used to be 6 o'clock news back in, someone else's generation, not mine, but you watch the 6 o'clock news. Nobody does that anymore. Few people do that.
True.
Well, sorry, fewer people are doing that. All I'm saying is it changes. So as it changes, as a marketer, you have to change. So we looked into front porch forum. Thank you. $7,000 for one ad. That's not cost effective. That's not how I'm going to spend the marketing budget. So there is a business opportunity for the local media news organizations to come together and create that platform that agencies like the Department of Health
And
DLL.
And I think they would make that if they had a secured, stable understanding of the potential purchase of those ads. And I think that that's kind of the heart of this debate is you're in kind of an interesting place where you're running it as a business, which is very surprising to me. I don't love hearing any kind of government thing run as a business, but I understand that's what you have to do.
But it
So
is
if
a
I could-
business.
I hear you. Yes, so I hear you. Can I just say this one point? But the thing is, I don't think necessarily in all cases government should be run as a business. I think that that's a fair philosophical point to hold.
But can I clarify though? I'm not running it as a business. It is a business. The Department of Liquor Control is a business
Yes.
that the state authorizes me to run.
You're running it as a business. I understand. It is a business.
Yeah,
Great.
business.
Whatever the semantics of the
yeah.
statement
I know you
are,
don't like that.
yes, I'm not debating you on that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to express to you that when we have those decisions being made, it would be nice to understand and justify the benefit of it. Because that's the question I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to get you to explain to me so that I can agree with you that social media is so effective at marketing that us not having you have some kind of metric would damage your ability to do your job. And I've heard that it's cheaper to do online on social media, I've heard that you get to target it and it's easier to use and that things change constantly. So you need to, that's the points that I've understood and I've heard from you. However, that doesn't defeat the case that you having fewer opportunities to do that would not have larger benefits for this other whole group of people. Like we're trying to weigh that. And you've already described a situation where you could get what you want with streamlined advertising, purchasing with local media, if folks had a consistent understanding of the profit that they could garner. So I'm trying to explain to you that you have an opportunity for collaboration here. And I'm not understanding the pushback because I don't see that social media is so critical to your running a successful marketing campaign. And that's the argument I'm trying to understand. And what I've heard you say is it's cheaper, you get to do it easier, and you need to be able to keep things flexible. And that's fine. I'm not disagreeing.
Yes,
with it.
and also you're reaching more people, right? So you're maximizing your marketing dollars, right? So that's why you're looking for those opportunities to, and social media isn't the only way that we, on the Vermont Lottery side, we spend money on, WCAX and.
No, I hear you. And that's the
point.
local media. Yeah, that's the examples you keep giving in reference are local media. So I'm just trying to, so the Spotify, Hulu's, all of that makes sense. What percentage of your budget is spent on local media?
It depends on the year and it depends on the enterprise fund. I don't have that right now. I can say on the Vermont Lottery side, it's mostly local media.
Like
On the-
more than 50%?
I don't have
People from
that.
out of state can't buy.
Sure they can.
I mean, they can if they're visiting,
Yeah,
but they can't. So-
right.
But
But
my
on
point
the,
is you
sure,
wanna
exactly.
advertise.
We're advertising within the state of Vermont.
Right,
On the liquor
exactly.
side, on 802 Spirits, for example, we have visitors that are coming to the state. And we are looking into doing a visitor campaign because when they come to stay in an Airbnb or their vacation home, we want them to shop local, right? We want them to shop at 802 Spirits as opposed to, bringing the product up from Massachusetts or New Hampshire.
Senator Hart.
Yeah, I mean, I'll turn on the television. I don't watch it a lot because I don't like it. But when I do turn it on, it seems like I get 6 to 8 New York lottery advertising.
Right,
And I might get 1 or 2 of yours.
yes.
So it's just offset that. I go into 802.
Uh-huh, thank
If I
you.
want to go in and buy a bottle of garbage, I go in, and the first place I look at is all Vermont made products. Because I like to do
Right.
Vermont made products, I buy the garbage in, I might buy vodka from up to over in
Smuggler's Nut.
Silo
Buffalo or
Distillery.
someplace, or the winery down in Putney, there might be some, I'm gonna buy that stuff. But because I want to give local.
Right,
So I also walk in there and there's always a paper with a sales slug.
Yeah, that's-
yes.
Paper too. There's always that paper that you guys have produced with a sale for this month or this week or whatever. So there's always that. So I see your advertisements. But I don't, for some reason I don't see them on my phone. I don't see them on my, I don't do Spotify. I don't do, what's the other one? You just talked about it.
Instagram?
I don't do Instagram.
Mhm.
And so I don't do Instagram. So I
So-
don't get on there.
You're making the case they should spend more money on social media.
Well, I'm making a case that I go in and I just see all the local stuff and that's what I go for.
So let me suggest we seem to have gotten off the topic a little bit.
Yeah.
With all due respect, I realize there are deep philosophical differences of opinion in the committee, but we're here to address the bill. And I think I heard you say at the initial point that you would supported the
Yeah, I'm trying to
exemption
hear
for
the-
the enterprise
Yes,
fund.
and I was really just trying to get out an answer
Okay.
to why, and I just feel like the answer to why was like, it's cheaper, so that was like.
I
okay,
think
you know,
my,
So I'm willing to drop it, we don't need to discuss it anymore.
my message is that there's an arbitrary percentage in the bill that is requiring, it's a mandate to agencies to spend a certain way.
Yes.
And that to me is cumbersome and bureaucratic. And I think that there's better ways of addressing the problem. It seems to me the problem you're trying to solve is that local media is struggling.
Yeah.
And it has been struggling for decades. And so I don't think the solution to that problem, which is a real problem, is to require state agencies to arbitrarily spend a certain amount of money on local advertising. I think you need to allow the authorities that are running these programs to decide best who their audience is, how to reach them, and how to spend that money most cost effectively.
Senator
That's
Clark.
what I'm trying to say here.
If this was enacted at 70-30, could you manage that? How does that fit with your spend at the moment?
So let me ask this, why 70-30? Where is the data that supports that?
80-20 was initially proposed.
Where did that come from?
It came from the drafters of the bill.
So
Well,
it's
we
an
did, we
arbitrary
did, we
number,
did
right?
actually, it's not an arbitrary number.
Okay.
So in previous testimony, what we heard is it's very hard to collect data on how these different agencies are spending their ad dollars. What we heard was there was kind of a informal survey done in the best way possible because the data was not available. They found around 69% or 59%, I don't remember what the exact number was about what we're spending. Again, totally
On local
on local organizations. So the idea was to add around 20% to that. So it wasn't arbitrary. And I think what we're trying to get at, or at least my point is, you may say as a marketing professional, this is a superior way to market, and I disagree. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is I don't agree with that professional opinion. And I also don't think that it would have a deep cut in your ability, even if it is a good professional choice at 80%, because you haven't articulated that 20% or more is being spent on those other locations. So it doesn't seem like it would be that cumbersome to you.
Which
So
is why I
maybe
asked
we
my
need numbers.
question.
Yeah.
Which is why I asked.
So here's an example. We can probably come up with the number that you're looking
That
for.
would-
How much is in, how much is out? I mean, literally, I sent the memo to you this morning, so.
We got it.
And the chair asked me to come in a couple hours ago. So
Oh.
what I'm saying to you is it is going to change depending on campaigns, right? So right now, we don't spend a lot of 802 Spirits advertising at all. To your point, Senator, we're not on digital. We do a little bit on Vermont Public and we do some on Facebook posts and Instagram posts. Here's the products we have. Here's where it is. However, as our sales are declining, nationally alcohol sales are declining, we're looking at out-of-state visitors that come in, right? You saw from the Vermont Tourism and Marketing, out-of-state visitors bring $4 billion to the state of Vermont. 3 times more visitors spend here than they do nationally, right? So now we think, okay, if visitors are coming here, we're thinking about a visitor campaign to reach those people that are in New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts to encourage them to shop at an 802 Spirits store. That would require us to do some out-of-state marketing. That's going to shift the percentage, and it's going to shift based on how that does, and if that's performing well or not performing well, or if it's performing well on the out of home, or it's performing well on social media, or it's performing well on streaming. We switch that up. That's what I'm saying. This flexibility is important.
No, I.
That we have the commissioner come back as we will continue to work through this bill. We've had indications that Commissioner Manoli and some of the advocates for it have been meeting and trying to find a sweet spot that could work for everybody. I will just say, in deference to the commissioner, we've asked them to run a business, basically, and to make decisions that they feel are the most equitable and good decisions in order to run that business as profitably as possible. And they're returning about $30 million a year to the state. So I wouldn't be in a position to tell them, hey, boy, I think that was a bad move, Wendy, to put that money here. You should have put it there. I'm in no better shape. This is what they do for a living. I mean, that's their business. They're running it. So I'm in support of also exempting them, the 2 enterprise funds from the bill, because it's not general fund dollars.
Yeah,
Is that fair?
Yeah, I appreciate that characterization, and I'm very open to it. I do think we are the board of this for-profit company. We are the board of this for-profit company.
Actually, there isn't the current lottery board.
And we are in charge of that board.
Okay.
So it feels like if we as a group of people who makes decisions about a business, that this is an example where profitability is taking more importance than the other external factors. So what I'm saying is, I know, and what I'm saying is I am okay. And I understand you do have to say, as the CEO of this company, don't hurt our profits. I'm saying sometimes there are business decisions that are more important than profitability.
Okay,
Like Darn Tough, they choose to buy specific types of wool because they have a quality of a product. We are trying to have the quality of a product. So it's okay that it costs us more money to buy local. It's the same argument your marketing campaigns
Right.
make. So I understand that the profitability, you have to say that makes complete sense. You have to do it. But we also get to decide as running a business, the dollar doesn't necessarily always exclusively matter.
That is the decision
That's-
we need to make at some point if we want to continue to be state operated liquor business.
And some
Right now, that is a decision we've made and we are very dependent on that $31 million it brings in. I want her to run it as a business because I love business and think business is a good paradigm for how to manage things effectively. So, but I'm Chair of Senate Economic Development, so I'm invested in business.
the
We'll
commissioner
get
does
into
have
this
to
conversation.
head down the road, so,
Yeah.
we will be delighted if you choose to come back.
I
and
will
give us any more
gladly
information.
come back with more information.
But back,
Thank you.
identify competing goods. We
Thank
all
you.
have competing challenges within our.
We have the deputy commissioner of BGS with us.
Thank
Emily, would you like to join us at the table?
Thank you.
This is Emily Kosicki. And,
Thank you, Wendy.
safe travels.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we have a memo, which I have not had a chance to read yet.
And thank you, Joanne, for producing it.
So I'll just throw it over to you if you choose to educate us in some fashion.
And update us on your conversation.
Yeah,
Yes.
Hello, Emily Kosicki, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services. For the record, Commissioner Manoli sends her regrets that she couldn't be here, so I will do my best to fill in for her. And apologies for the late submission of the memo. I'll really be just walking through highlights. We wanted to follow it up, so you have this, as part of your record. Wanted to say at the top, well, first, I'll speak in general. The memo speaks to H244. I understand you're looking at S84, there are differences between them. So we'll just speak general principles. As Commissioner Knight reflected, BGS shares in her sentiment in the beginning that we strongly support local media and we support the underlying goal of the bill to support local media. We have had meetings with Paul and the coalition that he's working with to talk about the bill, to talk about some of our perspective, which, we had some of the more operational concerns as, we're named in the bill, we're responsible for the reporting requirement in the bill, et cetera. So we've had some productive meetings. But we wanted to make clear that we don't speak on behalf of the entire state government. And so while we've been talking about some potential solutions from the BGS operational side, we strongly encourage Paul and his coalition, as well as the committee, to hear from other agencies and departments like Commissioners Knight's that have more of a marketing and advertising function than we do at BGS. So I can share just at the top, BGS can speak to our own advertising practices, which are minimal. I think last year we did $7,500 and it was local, 75% local media. So we also are not an agency, we're not a department that has a large marketing or advertising presence in the state, unlike other agencies and departments. The kind of things that we might be advertising could be, an art reception through the curator's office, things like that, where there's a more
Or an
local.
RFP. How do you advertise for RFPs when you're going out to bid on something?
They're
You
posted-
advertise that. How do you notice that?
They're posted on our website.
So they expect people to come to you to see what RFPs as opposed to going out to advertise. Okay.
Correct. And I'll introduce Deb Moore. She's our
Yes.
director of
She's your
purchasing and
secret.
content. Yeah, so she's here with me to answer any specific questions about the procurement process. So as noted in the memo, Currently, most advertising is decentralized through individual agencies and departments through delegation of authority. So that's why, you know, we can speak to our own advertising practices, but it's, you know, important that other agencies and departments who have a larger advertising and marketing function, you know, speak to their own practices and what's most effective for them. From our perspective, you know, we just think about how we would implement the bill, you know, and so that's how we view it. You know, we note that this would be a change. You know, we don't currently evaluate advertising contracts, you know, with this criteria. So that would be a change. It would add a new layer of process to the contracting process in that, you know, we envision there would need to be a certification form, you know, as part of our bid process so that organizations that are bidding on marketing contracts have to specify that they meet the criteria of being local media, essentially. So that's just one more step in the process. Again, it's not an insurmountable hurdle, but the feedback that we hear in our Office of Purchasing and Contracting is that vendors want it to be easy to do business with the state. They want a simple process. And this is just adding another layer to a process that already has many layers. So just sharing that. We also wanted to point out that the state already does employ a preference for Vermont businesses as part of our contracting process. As a general principle, we follow open competitive bidding, again, to maximize the best value for the state. But as part of Bulletin 3.5, which governs our contracting processes, we do recognize that everything being equal, we do give a preference to resident bidders of the state or for products that are raised or built, manufactured in the state. So, you know, our suggestion or our reflection is that, you know, this preference exists. We understand the goal. And, you know, a possible approach could be to take a step back, look at the data, look at what agencies and departments are doing, you know, how much they're spending locally. And instead of putting in a specific benchmark in statute, you know, we can work together on best practices, understanding current practices, et cetera. And, you know, there could be a concern that this could restrict the ability of agencies and departments to be nimble in where they need to place their marketing campaign, depending on what the message is. So again, that's something that BGS, with our limited advertising function, you know, we don't have a great deal of experience to speak to on how that could be limiting. So that's again why we just encourage talking to other agencies and departments about that.
And you mentioned your annual spending now is about 7,000.
Yeah, I think that was last year. That's what we did.
And you're already doing 75% of that locally.
Correct.
Okay.
Or that was our experience last year.
Okay.
But again, we have a much more limited. The function that we serve is for Vermont
Understood.
State government
Yeah.
and local issues.
Anybody have any questions? I think with that limited amount of expenditure, it wouldn't enrich anybody terribly more than what's already happening, just in my view. If we're talking about $7 million,
So that's a good point, and I don't know if they discussed it in the House, but a spending threshold that we might consider in this, in addition to the percent. So if you spend above X amount a year in your department, that this would apply. I mean, you're bringing up $7,500 does sort of beg the question. So, but on the other hand, I know Heather Pelham spends, you know, millions of dollars on marketing the state, and which is part of why I knew we had to exempt her, because that's what we want. We want her spending money elsewhere, not here. Except maybe 6 seasons and months when we get better deals on hotels and restaurants. But I think that the maybe a spending threshold is something we might consider, and I don't know that they discussed that at all in the House.
okay.
I'm open to that, yeah.
Just from
As,
practical perspective too, and we discussed this Commissioner Manoli's testimony on the House side, just in terms of, you know, logistics. If the legislature decided to go this route, you know, we understand that, we could still do delegated authority for decentralized advertising. But in terms of the language, we want to make clear that who's responsible for the tracking of the if there were a benchmark, so that BGS isn't monitoring, enforcing the 70%. Like, how are agencies and departments going to track that? And in a hypothetical, let's say if they put out an RFP for a certain campaign and one bid comes in and it's not a local media, like how do they respond to that kind of situation? So those are just some of the sort of practical considerations, like as this continues in the process, that would be worth exploring.
Enforcement is always a good question.
Senator White.
Thank you, Chair Culver. So wait, I guess I'm confused. So you have a contract with someone to do marketing other than yourselves?
That can be the case.
With
No,
some
do you-
departments,
No,
she's
do
actually,
you,
it's been another department, I think.
no, I'm just asking, does BGS have a contract to do marketing with someone else? Like, who, am I not allowed to ask that question? Can we not know who the?
No,
provider-
yeah. So
I
I'm gonna,
thought she was referring to other departments.
no, I'm gonna look to Deb for more specifics.
Yeah, like,
I mean,
a
I'm also,
consulting firm, like, how does it, you don't have a staff person who does the marketing, it's like you contract out with a third-party vendor, like a consultant?
that can occur, and again, we'll speak to BGS. And with us too is Cole Barney, he's our communications coordinator and legislative liaison. So for example, if what I'm aware of is there is a contract that supports marketing, and again, I referred earlier to the curator. So if we're doing an event like an art gallery and we want local awareness so that people come to the event and view the art, we work with that entity to help publicize, place information in local periodicals, et cetera, to drum up engagement.
Okay. Okay,
And we also
You gotta
have
just identify yourself.
Debbie Demore, Director of Purchasing Contracting with the Department of Buildings and Children's Services. Thank you. We also have a contract with a local marketing or advertising company that we're working with on a specific campaign for a project that we're implementing. So we work with them on branding, we've talked about advertising and, local media and other platforms. So really, between the curator's office and this one small component that we're working on, that's all the advertising that BGS does and that we can speak to. But we do have a contract with a local company that we obtained through the chief marketing office retainer contracts for marketing for the pre-qualified firms.
oh, okay, so there's a chief marketing group
In ACCD.
in
That's
ACCD.
Heather Pelham. She's the.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
learning as I'm going. And because this is new. So they say you can take this consultant, that you don't bid out as a department for that. So that's why maybe we're not getting a lot of good data. Is that basically, we should be asking this chief marketing person
So
to
similar.
write the contract, because you don't want to write the contract to get your marketer.
Well-
You want them to write the contract. So it's basically, you wouldn't have to do anything. It would only be that.
So similar to we, through our Office of Purchasing and Contracting, we have, for example, statewide contracts that are available for like a commodity, right? That all agencies and departments could utilize on a standardized basis. Similar concept that currently is available through the Chief Marketing Office for statewide marketing specific contracts.
Okay.
So those are available for agencies and departments to use. I think you may find that sometimes, different approaches could be taken by agencies and departments, like they might do some advertising not through those contracts.
Yep.
So again, we can speak to what we do. But some of those agencies and departments with larger, again, marketing functions, might do things a little bit differently. And I think that's again why you're not finding like centralized data.
Yes,
for all
that's
the
exact-
practices. And so that's, some of our suggestion was like, let's take a step back. Let's better understand the data and practices.
Okay, so I'm starting to understand a little bit more, because that was what confused me. Is you're saying we've got this contract and we don't want to have another criteria on top of it when we do these contracts. And it sounds like those contracts would be something that another entity would develop.
It would become part of the contracting process.
Okay.
Right? So similar to like we have a whole bunch of standards and criteria part of our statewide contracts. It'd be a similar concept for these. And so it's not saying like, we don't want to deal with this. It's just pointing out that there's just would have to be another layer added
This
into
is-
the contracting. process.
And you brought up the bulletin, which Sarah Clark has referenced before in this room. So you know your stuff. So I appreciate that. And that's why I wanted to ask you those questions. But I guess my only other question would be, so you do have a marketing person, like a person who does the marketing. Is the $7,000 to purchase ads exclusively, or and how much are they buying?
It can be so to offer, again, support and strategies for our marketing purposes. So like Director Demore pointed out, we have this new program that we're trying to build awareness and support for, and they're helping us strategize how we get that message out, how we get buy-in, and helping us with that. Is that
Great.
fair?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. I'm really glad you have that, actually.
Yeah.
We should do
We are
more
too.
Farmers Night promotion.
Well,
Okay.
actually, that's
Anyway.
what David's office,
That's
except
what I-
that's Friends of the State House, not just slightly so.
And we thank you very much for your
Thank
time. We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to have obviously more testimony on this probably next week.
Maybe we'll even have a bill from the House on it.
Yeah, because we have a pretty full week the rest of this week. So let's move on to, next week.
Paul.
Yep, okay.
Can I just make,
Very, very, very quick.
I want to make just one really, I think important clarifying point here.
Okay.
Particularly as it refers to, Commissioner Knight's testimony. Should I introduce myself? I'm Paul Heinz, freelance journalist and then a generally annoying individual in your committee room.
Taking up your time, Paul.
You can still, the current wording of the bill allows departments and agencies to purchase social media ads and other digital ads through a qualified local news organization. So you can, I actually think the Department of Liquor and Lottery would still have the ability to do all the things that it does, just rather than going through an ad agency or whatever. It could go through one of many locally owned businesses or locally operating businesses that provide those services. And there are any number of them, from the company that owns the Brattleboro Reformer, WTSA, Hall, or Vox, Hall, radio groups. There are a lot of options out there. So I actually don't think that any of that would be prevented by the current language.
That's interesting.
So I just wanted to make sure that was really clear. And I also really wanted to express that we are trying to work as closely as we can with BGS to satisfy their operational concerns here. And I think one of the early concerns we heard was they don't, want to be sort of the cop enforcing that every department agency does this. But I think the language of the bill is pretty clear that this is by department and agency. And so each one of those would be responsible for complying with this. And just finally, and I promise I'll get out of your hair, I would urge the committee to be a little bit careful about additional exemptions, only because I feel like every single department and agency in the state government will come here in the coming weeks, and they will all have compelling reasons why they should be exempt from this. And, I think to us, it comes down to, is the state going to make this commitment to supporting local media or not? And if it is, then I think it's worth going forward, with a more general approach to it. And I think if we keep carving out more and more, there won't really be anything left. And, when we have more time, I'm happy to talk about other ideas I have to sort of achieve the objective without running into some of the problems you heard about.
Okay, thank you.
To that point, before we take this up again, Tucker, would you be kind of find out how many enterprise funds we have? Because actually, I think it's quite a few.
Sure, yes. Let's do that.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for humor me. Appreciate it.
We're running a little behind.
We're making good time though.
We're catching up.
We're-
That's because we're
gonna-
using our farm haul tractor.
Take up S-131. This is the act relating to approval of an amendment to the charter of the city of Burlington. And Tucker Anderson is here to, all we're gonna do today is walk through the bill. If there are any specific questions for Tucker, we're not gonna take any more testimony on this today, but we will next week.
Yeah, I totally oppose the bill.
We haven't even gone through it.
You haven't even-
I've read it and I oppose it because it's against the Second Amendment.
Oh, okay, well, let's
Oh,
just
there's
run
fair
through
Actually, I don't think it
the
does.
bill first.
Could we
Yep.
actually, do you mind, could we just go over what we are doing on the agenda today, just so I understand?
Sure.
So we're gonna hear from Tucker now.
And then
we're
he's gonna
hear-
stay and walk us through S-111.
Okay, because I saw Martine.
And she's gonna come back at
She's
3.
gonna come back. Okay, and then we've got 119.
Yep.
And are we having, are we doing all of the folks for 119? So.
Well, we're gonna try.
Thank you. because-
Again, we got off the floor late.
Yeah.
I really thought we were gonna get done by 1:30. but we
Okay.
didn't. Welcome, Tucker.
Thank you so much for having me. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. You should have in front of you S-131 as introduced.
Yep.
Which approves the amendment of the charter of the city of Burlington, specifically one amendment that was passed at the city's annual meeting in 2025 related to the possession of firearms. And from the top, I'm just going to summarize some of the relationship between charters and general law, and then highlight some of the areas of law that are involved here, so that I can then tee up that this will actually be a combined effort where I will be working with the committee on municipal law, government operations aspects, charters, and alcoholic beverages, because alcoholic beverage law is one of my subject areas. And then for the firearms judiciary aspects, Eric Fitzpatrick will be the legislative counsel who will be providing expertise on the Second Amendment analysis here.
That's very helpful.
Um,
So Eric Patrick talking about the Second Amendment.
So first, this is the first charter bill, I believe, of the session that the
It is.
committee is taking up. So the quick primer on how charters work. Charters are special acts that relate to a single municipality. This is part of the constitutional legislative authority that this particular branch of government has. Under sections 6 and 69 of chapter 2 of the Vermont Constitution, you have plenary authority over the municipal corporations within the state. Each charter designs, for example, the administrative aspects of the municipal corporation, its jurisdictional boundaries, but perhaps most importantly, they contain delegations of your supreme legislative authority. You have all the legislative authority within the state, and you give small pieces of it to municipalities through charters. And at some point, maybe this session, maybe next, we'll talk about Dillon's rule and the many Supreme Court of Vermont cases that expressly state that we are a Dillon's rule state, and what that will mean for purposes of analyzing and understanding some of the delegations of legislative authority within municipal charters.
Okay.
So here we are dealing with just the charter of the city of Burlington. And this particular charter amendment adds a new section 510 to the city's charter. A ban on firearms in any establishment with a first-class liquor license.
Wait, can I just, before we get into it completely, can I just ask a question about this process? So this charter is an S bill, so it didn't start in the House.
No.
That is correct.
Okay, so okay,
If you'd like, I can summarize how the charters usually play out and why they play out
can we
that
just
way.
go through that real quick? Because this is the first one we're doing, and I'm just trying, I feel like we never start these, so this hasn't been reviewed, there's no changes from the House. Okay.
Correct. This is fresh. Typically, charters do start in the House.
Right.
And that is because of a specific curiosity within the House rules, which is that municipal charters and mergers are exempt from all of the introduction and request deadlines under the House rules.
Okay.
The Senate does not have a similar exemption for municipal charters. However, there is, as you know, no request or introduction deadline in the first year of the biennium in the Senate. So senators could at any time introduce a charter amendment.
Okay, so so if, I don't want to misspeak here, but so this missed the deadline on the House side, so it's coming over here because of that?
It wouldn't matter because there's no deadline for charters in the House.
Oh, okay.
Explaining why historically so many charters have started in the House, and that's because charters are not subject to the introduction deadlines in the House. So the Senate has typically asked the House for especially those charters that are approved at or near the crossover deadline.
Okay.
Start with it.
Okay,
Because most that are approved are near town meeting week.
yeah,
And so they would, in many cases, not meet crossover because they would have been voted on and the process takes too long. So
okay, so there wasn't anything, there wasn't like a revote or anything, and will you tell us the vote numbers at some point, I assume?
I will send the committee a copy of the packet that was delivered by the Secretary of State's office containing
Okay.
all the certified charter materials for all of the charters that the committee may be considering in the future.
Thank you for that. I apologize. I
No, that's fine.
was just trying to remember where we were with charters.
Absolutely great graphing. If I was a better legislative counsel, we would have started there.
No, we didn't.
So I did read you the section heading that the city has used here just to point out that the section heading calls out that this is a ban on firearms in any establishment with a first-class liquor license. But first-class liquor licenses are very specifically those licenses that allow a retailer to sell malt or vinous beverages for on-premises consumption. The section later goes on to cover any license that is issued to an establishment for the sale of alcoholic beverages broadly on premises. And at a later time, we'll focus in on that and then describe all of the various licensed establishments that could be caught. That would include bars and restaurants, which I think is contemplated here, but would extend all the way down to special venue serving permits, which would incorporate, for example, a stall or farmers market.
Oh,
Subsection A expressly states that this section will supersede two sections in Title 24, Section 2291, Subdivision 8, and Section 2295. These are two components of what is colloquially known as the Sportsman's Bill of Rights. And those two sections prohibit municipal corporations from adopting ordinances, bylaws, rules, or other local regulations that would limit or prohibit the use, discharge, possession of firearms within a municipality. So there's this statewide prohibition on this sort of municipal authority right now that is codified in Title 24 and is the underlying purpose for having this specific charter language delegating authority to the city of Rome. The city is authorized to regulate the possession and carrying of firearms pursuant to this section. It's a good point to stop and state that typically when legislative authority is delegated, you delegate the whole or part of some legislative authority, and then the municipal corporation would adopt an ordinance that would govern that subject. But here, all of the regulatory authority is spelled out in specific detail, including the penalties that are associated with the prohibition. Subsection B. This is the operative language that contains the ban. So within the city, no person may carry or possess a firearm. It cross-references the definition in 13 VSA section 4016 subdivision A3
okay. Great.
in any building or on any real property or parking area. And I will flag for your later analysis with Eric in discussion, any building, real property or parking area under the ownership or control of an establishment licensed to serve alcohol on its premises.
Okay, so if I were someone who is hoping to make the argument that we should limit this, this might be a place to investigate. Because the standard for what a building is, I feel like I have had a conversation about this, but Eric is going to come back and explain that definition to us.
Yes,
Okay.
Eric will come back to discuss with you all some of the constitutional parameters here, and what I'm trying to tee up as a foothold for you.
Yeah.
Is that some of the terms that are used here may be ambiguous and broader than what is constitutionally permissible. And just for your future consideration and edification, not every building where these licensees are operating are exclusively under their control and may include other types of property, including residential property unaffiliated with the business.
Right,
Well,
like an apartment
And,
building, so the bar downstairs.
yeah.
I would also offer that
concept. I've
looking
never-
back, this is not the first time that this proposal or a similar proposal has come from the city. So you may be able to find a whole bunch of resources
Oh,
from the
great.
last time that this was brought up. And one of the issues that was flagged, and this was before even the Bruin decision, which I am certain you will hear about in Second Amendment analysis, was decided. But the issue of the parking areas is one that will also require some scrutiny.
Okay.
Subsection C contains exceptions. The prohibition shall not apply to law enforcement at the federal, state, or local level, acting within the scope of that officer's official duties. This is an exception that is incorporated into many of the firearms prohibitions. So for example, you can take a look at the firearms in hospitals section.
So this is police officers.
Federal, state, or local law enforcement officers.
Okay.
Members of the armed forces acting within the scope of their military duties. Any government officer, agent, or employee authorized to carry a weapon and acting within the scope of that officer's duties. Or the owner or operator of an establishment that is licensed to serve alcohol, provided that the person is not prohibited from possessing a firearm.
So
Yes, Senator White.
thank you. So I'm just trying to understand what each of those means. So I think I understand 1 through 3. 4 is the owner of the bar, essentially, is who we're talking about. They can have a firearm if they so choose. Can the bar itself have like a designated firearm?
That is not complicated, that is not contemplated, excuse me, by that opening clause in subdivision 4. So the exception is applied to the owner
Okay.
of the.
Okay. Because let's say, okay.
Remember that this exception is giving a carve out to individuals who might otherwise be committing a crime under the provisions of this bill.
Okay.
Which is kind of a little bit unconstitutional, saying I have a nationwide concealed carry permit. Right there. So that's against the Second Amendment. That whole bill is against the Second Amendment.
We've passed many bills people thought were against the Second Amendment.
Well, that one's junk.
Okay.
Larry.
Let's just let legislative.
Letting legislative-
All we're doing is running through the bill.
I love it. Okay, so the question I'm trying to get at is you can have a gun if you own the building.
Mhm.
You can have a gun.
You
While
can
you're there.
possess a firearm in the establishment on the real property or.
Unless otherwise prohibited.
Okay, and is it's not the license holder, could it be the owner of the property? Like, I just want to understand. So like if I own the filling station bar building, but I am not the licensee for the liquor license, is it that if I have the liquor license, I'm the person you're talking about, or if I'm the landlord of the building or the owner of the building?
This is some of the ambiguity that you're going to have to tease out in your analysis of the bill.
Okay.
And the language that is used is the owner of the establishment.
Establishment. It says, yeah, the establishment that serves alcohol.
And the prohibition applies to the building, which I think is what you were asking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to-
Owner of the building,
Yeah,
separate term from what is carved out in subdivision 4.
okay. So that's just an area then, because I think if you own property, you should be able to go on your property with your gun. I think that's fair. So you can do that under this.
You,
And protect yourself if you have to.
Yeah, so there's an exemption for that. So if I was someone who was very supportive of this and maybe wanted to have like a voice at the table, I might focus in on like that section.
right, but it's the owner and operator of the establishment, not so the building,
Correct.
which is
And
part of our challenge.
Yeah, that's kind of where I do see some ambiguity there.
There's lots to tease out.
Sorry.
That's okay.
There's lots of it. 'Cause
And
we,
he could have hired security of some sort too.
oh yeah, that's actually a great question. If I was a bar owner and I wanted to hire someone as security who had
They're
a
exempt.
firearm,
Law
they're-
enforcement is exempt.
but they're not law enforcement. If I hire a Securitas,
that is another area where you will likely need
Okay.
to clarify the exceptions. If you are going to include someone who, for example, is not a licensed law enforcement officer of the state, federal, or.
So that we could address in C1.
sure.
If you are ready for subsection D.
Moving on.
Great idea.
These are the penalties, and up top, I have a note here, which is that under the general law in 24 VSA, chapter 59, for the adoption of ordinances by a municipality, an ordinance must be either criminal or civil, but not both. Here, we're going to run through a series of criminal and civil penalties, including civil asset forfeiture in one of the subdivisions. Subsection D, the penalty for any violation of this section shall be subdivision 1, there's the criminal offense. Any violation may be considered a criminal offense, which shall be punishable by a fine of not more than $1,000 or imprisonment for not more than 90 days. Civil offenses in subdivision 2. Any violation may also be considered a civil ordinance violation punishable by a civil penalty of not less than $200 and not more than $500, and civil forfeiture of the weapon pursuant to subdivision 3. In subdivision 3, upon probable cause that a person is in violation of this provision. So a quick note about something that you should discuss with Eric Fitzpatrick is the timing of the civil asset forfeiture and seizure here is upon a finding of probable cause, not upon conviction, just to make that clear. A law enforcement officer may seize the weapon involved in the violation. The person from whom the weapon is seized or the owner of the weapon may appeal the forfeiture within 30 days to the Civil Division of the Superior Court. And there's some cross references there to the procedures in Title 12, but also Rule 74 of the Vermont Rules of Civil Procedure. In any appeal, the burden of proof rests upon the city. If the city fails to establish the required burden of proof, the item shall be returned to the person if no appeal is taken within 30 days, or if the city prevails on the Superior Court proceedings, the seized items become the property of the city.
Preponderance is the lowest standard of proof, I believe.
Preponderance, yes.
Thank you.
Preponderance of the evidence. That is all. The effective date is on passage. That is standard for municipal charters.
Senator Clarkson.
And I apologize, Tucker, you may have mentioned this while I was out getting water. But I'm just curious, this is an S bill, a charter bill.
We have gone through that. Yeah.
Yes, I thought.
Yes.
Okay, I'll
I'll
get filled in.
cover it again offline, maybe.
Normally there are H's. This is one that.
We think so alike, Allison. I literally made him stop when he was just getting started to explain this.
Something that I neglected to mention as well, at least maybe in detail, is that this is only one of the proposals that was passed at the
Oh,
annual city meeting.
but this
So,
passed the city, this was on a town meeting,
yes.
yes.
And
So,
he's gonna send us all the numbers.
right, but the charter in the House that contains all the things that were passed. Right?
There's no bill to approve prior amendments in the House yet.
It's in the works. Yes.
We can't disclose, it's lawyer
Yeah,
privileges.
Thank you. You're going to stick around for the next one.
Yes.
Can we take a brief break?
Boy, it's got to be brief.
Okay, I need to
We're already
charge-
45 minutes
Okay, I'll
behind.
go get it.
So
Okay, yeah. I
we'll
need-
go off for 5 minutes.
Thank